3. The curse and the blessing. In Deuteronomy chapter 27 and 28, we have a further and important insight into the implications of the law. These chapters give us the curses and blessings associated with the law. Curse, ban, and anathema are basically the same concepts. That which is under a curse, ban, or anathema is devoted or dedicated, that is, given over to destruction at the requirements of God. In the Church, the concept of the curse, ban, or anathema appears as excommunication. According to Harper, the biblical purpose of the ban is always ethical, and its purpose was to preserve religion when gravely endangered. The ban, curse, or anathema does not disappear from a society when it abandons biblical faith. The ban is simply transferred to a new area of life. Thus, writing early in the century, Harper noted, "Notwithstanding that the Church of the New Testament is the bearer of the higher interests of humanity, we are taught that when it is least definite in its direction as to conduct, when it is most tolerant of the practices of the world, then it is most true to its original conception. We are told that an indulgent church is what is wanted. Rigor and religion are now supposed to be finally divorced in all enlightened minds." This view is not often categorically expressed, but it underlies all fashionable religion and has its apostles in the golden youth who forward enlightenment by playing tennis on Sundays. Because of it, too, Puritan has become a name of scorn, and self-gratification a mark of cultured Christianity. Not only asceticism, but ascesis has been discredited, and the moral tone of society has perceptibly fallen in the consequence. In wide circles, both within and without the Church, it seems to be held that pain is the only intolerable evil, and in legislation as well as in literature, that idea has been registering itself. Harper was right. Earlier in the 20th century, pain was under the ban of humanistic society. Now, war, poverty, discrimination with respect to race, colour or creed, and Orthodox Christians are steadily being placed under a ban and are targets of legislation. No society can escape having a ban. The important question is, what shall be banned? According to Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 15 to 26, it is violations of God's law, not the law of the state or of the church, which place men under the ban or curse. 12 curses are pronounced, equal to the number of the tribes of Israel, to indicate a totality. These 12 curses are: 1. Against secret breaches of the second commandment. Exodus chapter 20, verse 4, verse 15. 2. Against contempt of or lack of due respect of parents. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, verse 16. 3. Against all who remove their neighbour's landmarks. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 14, verse 17. 4. Against men who lead the blind astray. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 14, verse 18. 5. Against all who pervert the justice due to foreigners or widows and orphans. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 17, verse 19. 6. Against incest with a stepmother. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 30, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 8, verse 20. 7. Against bestiality. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 23, verse 21. 8. Against incest with a sister or half-sister. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 9, verse 22. 9. Against incest with a mother-in-law. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 8, verse 23. 10. Against murder. Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. Numbers chapter 35, verses 17 following. Verse 24. 11. Against anyone who accepts a bribe either to kill a man outright or to bring about his death by false witness. Exodus chapter 23, verses 7 and 8, verse 25. 12. Against any man who fails to put the law into effect, who does not make the law the model and standard of his life and conduct. Verse 26. From this last curse, which applied to every branch of the law, it evidently follows that the different sins and transgressions already mentioned were only selected by way of example, and for the most part were such as could easily be concealed from the judicial authorities. At the same time, the office of the law is shown in this last utterance, the summing up of all the rest, to have been preeminently to proclaim condemnation. Every conscious act of transgression subjects the sinner to the curse of God, from which none but he who has become a curse for us can possibly deliver us. Galatians chapter 3, verses 10 and 13. O.V. Gerlach. The principle and the ground of blessings and of curses is very plainly the law. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 and 15. The foregoing curses specify particular sins of a depraved character, sins which are acts of viciousness. The 12th curse, however, includes every law of God and thus allows no area of escape from the curse except in obedience. Deuteronomy chapter 28, especially verses 1 to 26, gives us a magnificent declaration of blessings and curses. Two very obvious and important facts are in evidence. First, these blessings or beatitudes promise life, prosperity, and success to those who obey God's law. Klein is right in stating, Israel, if faithful to the covenant oath, would come out on top in every military and commercial encounter with other nations. Within the kingdom there would be abundance of the earth's goodness. Canaan would be a veritable paradise, flowing with milk and honey. Of primary import, Israel would prosper in her relationship to her covenant Lord. This is the secret of all beatitude, for his favor is life. Obedience to the law is an act of faith that God is faithful and will give to his people an abundant life and a goodly earth. David affirmed the faith of all Scripture in declaring, For evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Psalm 37, verses 9 to 11. David's words cannot be understood apart from Deuteronomy chapter 28, nor can Christ's beatitude. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. The meek, the tamed of God who obey him, are literally promised the earth for their obedience. They are blessed in the city and in the field, in the fruit of their body and the fruit of the field, in basket and in store, and in everything. The promise is that the meek shall eat and be satisfied. Psalm 22, verse 26. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way. Psalm 25, verse 9. That is, he will guide them in justice and teach them the way of life. The law is thus very clearly the way to a rich life on earth. There is no promise of any prosperity apart from the law. The obedience of faith is the law. Second, with respect to curses, banishment from the promised inheritance was the extreme of malediction. Just as the law opens up life and the land, so lawlessness opens up curses, defeat, and finally death. The major part of the chapter is given over to a precise specification of the consequence of the curse. It was the curse on lawlessness, when Adam and Eve denied God as the principle of life and law as their sovereign, that led to their expulsion from paradise. It had been the same curse on lawlessness which, age after age, has doomed man to frustration, defeat, and death. To deny God is to deny his law and sovereignty. More conversely, to deny God's law and sovereignty is to deny God. To affirm God's law is to accept his sovereignty and his lordship. Faith and law are inseparable, for faith without works is dead. James chapter 2, verse 20. In fact, the blessings are represented as actual powers which follow the footsteps of the nation and overtake it. Not only does Scripture teach a doctrine of sovereign and irresistible grace, but it also teaches a doctrine of sovereign and irresistible blessings and curses for obedience and disobedience to God's law. This is the inescapable meaning of Deuteronomy chapter 28. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 2, we are told that all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. In verse 15 it is stated that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. In both cases, an irresistible consequence is declared. Man is not at liberty, however, to choose the consequence. That is, he cannot declare that, because he is due to be blessed, he chooses to be blessed by means of money, a new wife, or 4 sons. Similarly, man cannot choose his punishment. The world of curses and blessings is not a smorgasbord affair, where man can exercise his free choice and choose to his taste. At all times God is sovereign, and he shall choose our inheritance for us. Psalm 47, verse 4. The history of that irresistible curse began with the fall and continues to this day. The irresistible blessings began in Eden, and throughout history have been in effect wherever obedience has prevailed. By his Beatitudes, Jesus Christ confirmed Deuteronomy chapter 28 and made himself known as the lawgiver. This was sensed by his hearers, for the people were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Matthew chapter 7, verses 28 and 29. The scribes interpreted the law. Jesus Christ declared the law as its maker. As the maker of the law, his words were a revelation of the law. Therefore, the curses and the blessings of the law depended upon hearing and obeying his sayings. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. Man wants and needs a world of curses and blessings. Everything in his nature, because it is God created, demands a world of consequence and causality. However, because man has fallen and is in rebellion against God, he wants those curses and blessings to be meted out on his terms, in relationship to his demands and his estimate of justice. Not too many years ago, this writer had more than a little experience with gamblers in Nevada. Although generally profane men, they sometimes prayed, and they held it against God that their prayers were answered according to their heart's desire. Sometimes, when gambling with desperation, they prayed for sensational success, promising God that a large portion of the winnings would go to the priest, minister, or church. One man even promised to repay his mother some money he had long owed her. Somehow, because of their noble declarations, God, as their partner, was supposed to bless them. And it was evidence of the fraud of religion that God did not bless them. In all such cases, men establish the conditions, rules, or laws of blessing, and then expect God to comply. Since this kind of bargaining is blasphemous, it can only merit judgment, not a blessing. An unsound enterprise is not made good by naming God a partner. Man cannot break God's law without being broken. Examine again the curses. A man is not exempt from the curse of the law because he has avoided the first 11 secret offences. The curse applies to all who fail to put the whole law of God into effect. When God arraigns us for violating his law, we therefore cannot plead that we did not commit incest or bestiality. We are given a total law, and the declaration is, "Cursed be he that confirmeth not all the words of this law to do them." Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 26. There are many aspects of the law of which the worst of men approve. In prison societies, murderers despise rapists, thieves despise murderers, and so on. Each criminal wants all the world of law and order except his personal area of exemption. Some criminals are proudly self-righteous of their areas of compliance. No thief is exempted from prison because he has not murdered, nor is any murderer exempt because he has not committed rape. Similarly, in the sight of God, we are accountable for the total law, and we cannot ask to be exempted from the curse if we keep 99% of it and then treat the other 1% with a total casualness or contempt. Repeatedly, God has placed moralistic churchmen under his curse for this kind of reasoning. For whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. James chapter 2, verse 10.